All right, welcome to the Boost, conversations with people promoting mental health. And I'm so excited to have Melvin Varghese back on the show today. Melvin, how are you?
Steve, incredible, and to be here. I'm doing well, and it's always fun when we get to have a conversation.
I love talking with you. For anybody who doesn't know Melvin, look him up immediately. Follow him on all his socials. He's a psychologist. He is the founder of Selling the Couch. And we're going to talk today about Mental Health Month, which is what it is right now. May is Mental Health Month. Sometimes they call it Mental Health Awareness Month. And check out our socials too for some of Melvin's perspective on Mental Health Month and what he's working on. But Melvin, I would just open the floor to you. When it comes to Mental Health Month, what is right now on your mind or of interest to you? There's so many things we can do, and we can't boil the ocean, but we can make a big impact kind of starting where we are. So, when it comes to Mental Health Month, what sort of has your focus right now?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's amazing that we're having this conversation like in this season of life. What's resonating for me a lot is talking to my younger self and the things that I struggled with. One, I was born in India, and I we immigrated to the U.S. after I was born, or after I finished first grade. So second grade onwards, English is my second language, and so just having to navigate all of that. And I remember even my parents telling my brother and I, this will be like our last chance to go to the US because they had delayed getting their green cards for a couple of times because they thought they were just going to settle in India. And I remember them saying, like, we're leaving here, and part of the reason we're leaving is because we want to give your brother and you an education that we couldn't have or we couldn't be able to provide. And I just thought it was such a noble calling, like thing, like to be able to sacrifice their own stability for us. But it also brought, uh, a tremendous amount of pressure. Like we couldn't mess this up. And what seems to now be resonating is the mental health concerns that arise for a lot of immigrants, particularly South Asian immigrants who have to navigate this because, a lot of times parents are leaving countries and they're also, putting kids in high achieving public schools or private schools. They're doing Kuman and they're doing all of these other extracurriculars just to make sure that their kiddo is well rounded so that when they apply to college, they're getting into prestigious college. It's all of this tremendous pressure. And we were talking about this right before. I've had the incredible opportunity to do two workshops in the last 6 weeks, both to groups of nonprofits, primarily of South Asian individuals, and it's all about this intersection of high achievement and mental health, and the costs of high achievement that we don't often think about or even have had to navigate even before.
Hmm. There's something so interesting about how often someone with a lived experience can speak to a community or a group of people in a very special, specific way. And for you to have immigrated from India and to be a high performer yourself, be entrepreneurial, and to have gone through some of that, perhaps I can't say how much pressure you went through, but what you said was there's a lot of risk reward when your parents bring you over, and then you better not screw this up, kiddo. That's tough. That's some early pressure. And so then for you to sort of return to a community and say, um, that you're especially attuned in to maybe some of the mental health challenges or some of the pressure, life pressure that they're dealing with in a very authentic way. That's something that you can uniquely do.
Yeah, I think all of that is right. I mean, the piece or the gap that I didn't share was, I remember now looking back. This is eighth grade. I had just started algebra, and I remember I had what we would think now is OCD. Like I had to have my like table arranged in a certain way before I could study for algebra and all of these things. And then my first year of college, I had I went to a small liberal arts school. I had almost like a 90% academic scholarship. And the first year, at the end of the first year, I had gone in pre-med. The intent was to go in and become a pediatrician because in Indian families, there's a stereotype, right? You either become a doctor, lawyer, engineer, or you're a failure. And I had gone in wanting to be a pediatrician, and it was so cutthroat. And I realized my brain just didn't work that way, like with OChem and all of this stuff. And I ended up pulling a 2.9 GPA and went on academic probation. And I was studying hard. It wasn't that like a lack of studying. And I went through a really difficult bout of depression, had really intense suicidal thoughts. And I told my parents, and my parents had the foresight for me to go see a psychologist. And that's what propelled me to enter mental health because I was like, oh my gosh, like I felt so much better. And I just thought there had to be other kids like me who were struggling.
Hmm. Well, if there's ever another moment in your life where you feel that way, you can call me. You can call a lot of other people, of course, but you know, I would call you if I was in that place. You're that sort of person that I implicitly trust, explicitly trust. I would definitely call you if I was struggling, and it can affect anybody. That's part of the message I get from it. Can affect Melvin. It can affect anybody. Um, when you and I can't speak too much to it, so maybe you can. When you present for the South Asian community, like you've done, you mentioned there were some expectations to be a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer or else. Are there some other trends or patterns or stigmas that you see specific to the South Asian community that you speak to?
Yeah, of course. And again, I mean, these are sort of broad patterns, right? So I think one is this. We were talking about this term, the gilded pressure cooker. That's a common term that I ran into recently, and it's basically exactly what it sounds like. So a lot of times these parents live in like really nice suburbs, have nice houses, drive nice cars. Their kids are in all sorts of extracurricular activities. They're in private tutoring. They are, from like ninth grade on, they've got a college coach that they're working with so that they're, starting to get like college essays and all that stuff. But this is like eighth, ninth grade on kind of that sort of pressure, right? Um, but it's a gilded pressure cooker because everybody's doing this, right? And there is almost this sense of how do you stand out? And then also there's like a real practical side. One of the things I shared in this talk a couple of weeks ago was the admission rate of like Yale University. So 40 years ago, the admission rate of Yale was 25 out of 100. So if you one in four people that applied would get into Yale, and now it is 4 out of 100. And there was a stat that I also read, which was basically if you take the number of valedictorians and salutatorians in the US, which is around 54 to 56,000, and and you took the top 20 schools, like based on the US News Report rankings, only half of those would actually have seats available in those colleges, which is like insane, right? And so I think what's happening, particularly among South Asians, and again, these are broad things, is there's so much competition for so few seats. And what often then happens is for a lot of these kids, teens, college students, grad students, even the young professionals, right? Their identity becomes about what they achieve. And as soon as they don't achieve what they set out to because of, sometimes of things that aren't even beyond their control, then it causes a lot of mental health concerns. It causes this crashing of identity and this re-examining, and it's worse. I think I was an example of it, right? You have these really intense suicidal thoughts because I remember I thought I had failed my parents. Like I kept thinking they left and to come here and this was the sole purpose and here I am now in academic probation. Why can't I figure this out?
So much there, as always, with you. So, starting at the top of that, I wonder about the college education application process. Is that because there are more international students applying now than there were before, or just uh, more people with higher education? I'm curious about that trend, and I don't know if you can unpack it at all. But I mean,
Yeah.
the sheer population, like the U.S. is
Yeah.
something like 300 million, 330 million,
Yeah.
and China is 1.4 billion. India is 1.47 billion. So,
Mm-hmm.
do you know anything about sort of that trend?
Yeah, I mean, I'm starting to read up on it, so I think it's exactly what you alluded to. So one, there are more international students applying. I think one, there's also more people as we have advanced here in the U.S. as a society. I think there are also more people applying to colleges, and then I think the other side of it is this is still really early, but my understanding is the number of seats that are available has not significantly changed in many institutions. So, and I forgot the term that they use, but it's essentially creating a supply demand issue, right? So there's actually a term where many colleges know that most, like especially the very competitive colleges, know that most of the kids that apply will not get in. But to keep up the aura of prestige and exclusivity, they still encourage everyone to apply, knowing that most of these kids will not get in.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. That's fascinating. So there's a, and it's maybe manufactured, but there's a shortage of very high end universities that
Mhm.
smart people can, like people who are accomplished what they need to accomplish to get into university. Not that that's necessarily smart or not smart, but people who are pursuing that path of education. Um, there's just not enough options. Um,
Yeah.
and then it's like manufactured failure if you don't get into those universities, because there's only
Mhm.
that cream of the crop or those top 20. And so if you don't make it
Yeah.
there, then yeah, what happens? So
Yeah.
what's your main message to this audience around mental health specifically for the South Asian community? What are you going in and saying?
That's a great question. So one thing I'm saying is, I think it's really important that we model failure as parents, particularly as immigrant parents, because I think there's this sometimes, I feel like my partner and I, we struggle with this as well. There's this element of like we have to show that we're put together and achieving and capable, but we don't show vulnerability enough, So I think modeling and talking about failure and that failure is a natural byproduct of doing great things. And over time, especially as you do more and more stuff, you're going to fail and or things aren't going to work out the way that you imagine, right? So that's like one message. The second thing is around identity, really separating what you do from who you are. And I think that gets really wrapped up, right? Because it's that I got into this college or I got this promotion or any of those kind of things. And then I think the third thing I've been sharing with them is, I mean, the research is saying there's a lot of interesting research. One of the most interesting things is that the parents being willing to share and be open and vulnerable with each other about what they're going through, and them having a release valve actually impacts the well-being of the students regardless of whether their kid is present or not. So it's almost like them being able to release it impacts how they parent, which then lowers the heat on the kids.
Hmm. Well, thank you for being on the show. I hate to have to wrap so early. You're one of those people I could talk a long time with. And thank you for the work you're doing for clinicians and to help them, you know, create online content and, make better podcasts and get their voice and their message out there into the world. You're helping people magnify their message, and and then you're doing awesome work yourself. So I want to continue to run alongside you and stay in touch as you do big things. But thank you for sharing your perspective today about mental health, specifically in the South Asian community, and uh, some of the challenges that you see, and then some of your messages back to them that I think is it's got global application, but certainly from your experience, it resonates really at a deep level, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Steve, thank you. Really grateful for everything you're doing over at MHM. And yeah, I'm grateful to call you a friend.
All right. All right. I'll see you soon. Thanks.